This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We are getting into week number 11 in the NFL, which means we're starting to see some surprise contenders rise in both conferences. Maybe the Lions aren't a surprise. Maybe that's a mislabeling there on my behalf, but we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns as well, break down our read on those teams in the futures market, their upside, and then we'll talk about week number 11 as well to get you ready for what should be another fun week of games. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, the Bills, a disappointment last night once again, which I think does make the playoff race pretty fun, but did not make my bank account very happy. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Jim. It was not a fun Monday night for this household, but we did talk about Cortland Sutton first touchdown, which ironically we did talk about Dalton Kincaid on the other side, right? First touchdown, he scores the second one. So, a little bit of profit there from the sportsbook standpoint, but yeah, had the Bills covering that 7 and the over in the game, and Russell Wilson and Sean Payton out of the bye made clowns of the two of us. So that was a fun one.
Yeah, I did feel like a clown betting on that dumb team last night, but Ryan, you know what? Paint me up because I'm doing it once again this week. We'll talk about my read on the week 11 spreads and totals later on today, get my first look into week number 11. But first, we're going to start things off by talking about the futures market, talking Lions, talking Browns, and other futures Ryan likes entering week 11. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. We're here every weekday breaking down the NFL. We also have college football coming up for tomorrow with Dr. Ed Feng. Don't forget that Tom Vecchio has you covered for Thursday night and Sunday night football. And also next week, Tom will have a Thanksgiving Day preview, talking props for all 3 games there. That'll be up next week. So if you want to get these shows as they go live, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. Now, Ryan, let's begin things off by talking about the Detroit Lions, because they have been a very fun team to watch so far this year. Another win over a competent team on Sunday in the Chargers, currently plus 550 to win the NFC. Now, it's a pretty top-heavy conference. You got the Eagles, got the 49ers, and I think if we want to bet the Lions here, we got to make sure they are in the same tier as those two teams. So do you think the Lions are there yet? High enough to justify consideration at plus 550? Or is it really kind of a 2-horse race, maybe a 3-horse race if you put Dallas in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they belong in the conversation. I mean, what Dan Campbell's been doing with this roster. And gotta listen, I've been the harshest critic of Aaron Glenn on the feel like they haven't been able to put it together as of late, and they're going out and doing the thing. I know they allowed like 38 points on the Chargers, so they holding opponents respectively. And so when you're looking at the rest of the season schedule for the Detroit Lions, I think that's what really jumps off the page. You're not talking about them playing against really tough competition for a couple weeks here until we get to the Christmas Eve game against Minnesota. And then they'll have Minnesota, Dallas, and then Minnesota to wrap up the season. But at that point, like, they might be sitting at, 13-2. When it comes down to it, it's going to be interesting to see how the NFC East plays out, because Philly and Dallas are going to have some tough battles here. Philly's got a really tough schedule to kind of start after their bye, and Dallas has got a tough schedule to kind of end it on. Now, the interesting one there is San Francisco, and we talked about them last week, Jim. I'm on them to get the 12 wins, and I really feel confident about what they're able to put together, especially with them getting healthy back on that end. So I think San Francisco definitely has a case really to be in that 1 seed, and obviously the sports book has it appropriate. But yeah, Detroit, just with the way that their schedule shapes up, this could be, the best value that we get on them for a while here. So if you believe in them, I would take a shot now.
Yeah, they are in a good spot to potentially at least be a contender for the 1 seed. I agree that San Francisco is a better team, but San Francisco already has 3 losses, where Detroit's at 2, and that does matter quite a bit. Now, I have San Francisco as kind of being in a tier of their own right now in my numbers in the NFC. It's them, number 1. Then it dips down to, Dallas is 2. I don't know if I'd hand rank them above Philly, but Philly is 3, and then Detroit. So pretty in line with what the sports book has. But like you said, the NFC East is pretty tough, and that could ding things. And if the Lions are able to work their way toward the 1 seed, that'd be a pretty big advantage for them to have, because you're getting Jared Goff indoors for the entire playoffs then, if that does wind up being the case. Whereas Dallas, the only other indoor team really in contention for this crown. I don't know if that's enough to take the Lions to plus 550. I think that my respect for San Francisco primarily is the main reason why I might not get there. But they're at least worth considering is what I would say. So I think it sounds like we're kind of on the same page with them, where we're leaning more towards San Francisco. We view them as being the biggest threat in the NFC right now, but the Lions have at least earned some discussion here for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Joe.
All right, let's flip things over and talk about the AFC, because we talked a lot, Ryan, about the Ravens and the Bengals and how good they've been so far this year. The Bengals, the potential they could show, I should say. But on Sunday, it was the Cleveland Browns kind of coming out and playing well against the Ravens, especially in the second half. Deshaun Watson finally got going there. Now they're 6-3. They have a plus 44 point differential. They've got the best defense in football. Any interest for you in buying in Browns futures right now, or is the market valuing them pretty properly?
Yeah, I think they're valuing them properly. I might have them a little bit higher. They're right there with Jacksonville, but Jacksonville's just been a tough one for me to trust all season. Miami's a little bit too high too. We're going to start seeing from Miami if they're the real deal come late, with them playing against some more playoff contention opponents. You love what you saw from Cleveland. I mean, that's what they paid Deshaun Watson to do, to put up points and to beat the top tier talent, and they keep them in the conversation. They are tied for second in the division right now with the Steelers, and they have a matchup with the Steelers in week 11. So this is going to be an interesting one. Steelers were able to get them in the first matchup, so we'll see what comes down to it. The thing that I worry about with the Cleveland Browns is, are they going to be able to keep this up for the rest of the season? They've been dealing with a lot of injuries at the quarterback position. We weren't even sure, if Deshaun Watson was going to be healthy to, play these past couple of weeks, and having PJ Walker and DTR out there at quarterback. And so I am curious to see if this honeymoon kind of rides out. But, when you're looking at their schedule, they do have a couple favorable matchups there. After Pittsburgh, you get Denver, you get LA, you get Jacksonville at home. They'll play the Bears at Houston, will be an interesting matchup, and then the Jets and Bengals to kind of wrap it out. So they should be in the mix. But this is a team that offensively, I don't know how we can trust them. They've just been Jekyll and Hyde all season, but yeah, that defense can keep up with anybody, and so that might just be enough to keep them in games. Granted that Deshaun Watson can take care of the football.
Yeah, they're weirdly very similar to Pittsburgh, where the defense keeps them in games, then the offense can do some funky stuff late to kind of win games. And I don't view that as being the most sustainable profile. I think that if we're talking about upside enough to win the AFC, they're 10-1. I have no interest there personally at 10-1, because I need to see it more than one half out of Deshaun Watson, because it's not just like a couple games where things have been pretty rough. It's been ever since he came back. So I need to see it more consistently. The offensive line, as you alluded to, is pretty banged up right now. That's a concern as well. I know, again, they won without those guys on Sunday, but one half against Baltimore, where there was defensive touchdown there by Greg Newsome. I need to see it a bit more. So personally, I'm very okay not buying into Cleveland right now. If they make me regret that later on, then so be it. They're currently 9th in my power rankings with just 2023 data in there, because that defense is so good, but that's still behind, teams they're going to have to fight with. It's behind a lot of AFC teams. So even though I think they're probably properly ranked in the AFC, I probably put them above Jacksonville personally, but like they're probably properly ranked in the AFC. I don't see enough to incentivize me to actually take a bite at them, just because I still don't buy in that offense having legitimate staying power given the competition they'll face.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just, they've shown us enough through this year, which, it's incredible to think about, like 6-3 record. When I saw the rundown here, I wasn't even like putting Cleveland in that scenario. But the defense has just been so stout. You love the matchup that the matchups that they are getting most recently with the offense on the other side. So they should be able to keep them in games. Yeah,
that's a big thing. It means that they'll be able to, like, they have the upside to get there in terms of like having a very good record. I just don't know if they have the upside to beat a playoff, like a really good playoff team in the playoffs and stuff like that. So, over a 4-game stretch and stuff like that. Okay. Beyond the Lions and the Browns, Ryan, which team's got the biggest boost up or boost down for you based on what we saw in week number 10?
Yeah, I kind of don't feel good about this one as a stock up, because we talked about them yesterday on what happens when they play this opponent every time. But Dallas Cowboys having a stock up is interesting. Now, the interesting thing that comes about it, and they sit 2 games behind Philly right now. And so when we're looking at Philly's record, like I'm saying, they're going to have some tough games coming up here. They got the Chiefs on Monday night. Then I believe they play San Fran. Buffalo, then San Fran. And so when you're looking at, those 3 matchups there, like what happens if they come out with 2 losses, from these games. Now they're coming out of their bye. So I think they'll be able to fire on all cylinders. They're going to be geeked up for the Super Bowl rematch against Kansas City in Arrowhead. Or whatever the new stadium is called. I still call it Arrowhead. So I think Dallas, they kind of, if they can, get these next couple of weeks going, like they're going to play Carolina on the road, then they get Washington, Seattle, and Philly, all 3 at home. Like if they're going into that Philly game on December 10th, and they, have an undefeated record, and Philly's slip, maybe they have only lost 1 game of those 3 that we talked about, but then they lose against Dallas there. It could be really interesting for Dallas controlling their own destiny. Now, Dallas is outscoring opponents at home 160-50, Jim. Like it's just outrageous what they're doing at AT&T Stadium. And that game against Philly on December 10th is at home, and they've won 5 straight against Philly at home. So, Dallas, not to put the blinders on here, but they just need to focus on these next couple of opponents and really just get wins lined up in the column for them. And then, kind of just watch what Philly does. I love Philly. They deserve to be at the top right now. Like they are just incredible on both sides of the football. I think, Jalen Hurts is incredible, but we see this kind of every year in the regular season where things can kind of falter, especially with those divisional matchups come into the fold. Dallas is probably, I want to get on them right now, just because of the way it shapes up for them these next couple of games. But then to close out the season, they're looking at going on the road to Buffalo, Miami, Detroit at home, and then finishing up with Washington. So, we could be looking at the best value for a while there, and then it could kind of shape up. But I think any type of, the conference, if you want to take the shot on them, I think that's fair at plus 550 in the division even. When we were looking at that, I believe they're plus 140. To win the division. I'm sorry, plus 410. Yes, plus 410 to win the division. My bad. So yeah, this is a spot that I want to be on right now as things shape up.
Yeah, the division is interesting. I think the Cowboys get this, like, they get a bad rap for not being, they're kind of like in the same bucket as the Dolphins, where people sometimes say they can't beat like the top end teams, but like they showed last week that they can beat the top end teams. They just didn't beat Philadelphia. But I think they played well enough in that game to show they're not a fluke. And also, like you said, like they do tend to play a lot better at home. That Philly game was on the road. So I do personally feel like they are a legitimate team that will need to be reckoned with in the NFC. As I mentioned before, my 2023 only numbers do have Dallas ranked a bit higher than Philadelphia right now. Again, I don't know if I would do that personally. My numbers tend to be a bit weird to Philadelphia, and Jalen Hurts was injured for basically the entire first half of the year, and maybe you'll be healthier coming out of their bye week. So I'm not sure if I'd hand rank them there, but they're a team that I think is legitimate, is what I would say about Dallas for sure. And plus 410 to win the division. I know the way things line up is pretty tough, but as you said, Philadelphia facing Kansas City on Monday night. They've got to face Dallas once again later on. They got some tougher games in there too. So this division is not done as of right now, despite Dallas being plus 410. Any other futures you want to check out entering week 11, Ryan?
Yeah, I think we got to talk about the Houston Texans here. Just real quickly. I mean, the fact that CJ Stroud has entered the MVP conversation, as a rookie with only 10 games under his belt is absolutely incredible. And the way D'Amico Ryans has this team going and coached on defense, I think there's some merit there. Like AFC South plus 270. Jacksonville just don't do it for me. They're not showcasing enough to be able to put teams away. I don't trust them in the matchups where they're supposed to win big, and the matchups where they have a tough opponent on the other side. I can't trust them to put up the points and kind of keep things going there. They're just really I don't understand this team, and it feels like they have the pieces together, but not really. So Houston, they're kind of just even keel. I think they're the way that CJ Stroud is playing right now, I think they can beat any team. They got Arizona, they got a Jacksonville team coming at home, then Denver, and then on the road to the Jets. But really, the fact that they have so many of these AFC South team opponents on their schedule, makes me feel pretty good about the outlook for them. So plus 270 to win the South. I think they're plus 110 to make the playoffs. Really interesting stuff there when you're looking at the Houston Texans.
Yeah, the Texans, at least as of right now, they only have one or two. Is it one or two? They have 2 games remaining against teams currently in the playoffs. One is Jacksonville at home, and they already beat Jacksonville once so far this year. And then they have Cleveland at home. Now, that game's going to be tough, given how good Cleveland's defense is. So that's a pretty tough one. But they get Tennessee twice. They get Indy once. They get Denver. You mentioned the Jets game, Arizona this weekend. I think they're a good bet again this weekend against Arizona. I've shown value in the Texans money line every single week so far this year. That streak does continue entering week number 11. So we're just going to keep on running back. And what that says to me, Ryan, is that sportsbooks have not given them the proper respect yet. And that does translate to all markets. So to make the playoffs plus 110, I think that's very fair. Like you said, to win the division, they're plus 270 right now as well. I think both those are at least considerations, given that the passing offense is a pretty sticky metric, and they have one of the best passing offenses in football right now, despite not having their left tackle for 3 or 4 games, despite not having Tank Dell for a game, no Nico Collins for a game. They've had injuries, and they're still playing this well. So I actually agree with you. We're they're in the discussion for sure, not just to make the playoffs, but also to potentially win the AFC South, given they've got the win over Jacksonville in hand and have another game at home against them coming up in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the story, love the narrative around this team. Like you're seeing D'Amico Ryans, he's the second favorite, I think, right now for Coach of the Year behind Dan Campbell. Really fun stuff there going on in Houston. And
Nick Caserio, caught a lot of crap for all the Jack Easterby stuff back in the day, but he should be in the discussion for executive of the year too, given that he brought in Stroud, brought in Will Anderson, brought in Tank Dell, and had some pretty solid other options in there too. So overall, just really fun Texans team. We'll talk about as I talk about spreads and totals I like for week number 11 in just 1 second. But first, Ryan, got to say thank you to you for joining me once again, as always. Good luck to you across the rest of this week. We'll talk to you once again next week on Monday to break down pretty fun game between the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Yeah, can't wait to chop it up for that one. That'll be a fun one, Jim. Have a good day.
All right, you as well. You can find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. And again, I'll be back with us once again next week to break down that Monday Night Football game. As mentioned, we're going to dive into the spreads and totals where I see value across week 11 here in just 1 second. But first, score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager. Only $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's take a look now at where my numbers are showing value across week number 11 in the NFL. And it does begin with where we discussed with Ryan on the Houston Texans, -4.5 taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this number is moving towards Arizona the past 24 hours. So there may be value in waiting to see if we can get 3.5 at some point. It is 4 at some spots, but I think it's moved a bit too far already. My model makes Houston almost a touchdown favorite in this game, even with a pretty sizable bump up for Arizona, getting Kyler Murray back, kind of taking numbers Murray had last year, applying those to this year's Cardinals team. And I still can't quite get to this at 4.5 for Arizona, even when you include a prior. So this is the model I trust, including a prior. Houston ranks 7th in my schedule adjusted passing efficiency numbers, and they're 11th in overall offense. Arizona's defense ranks 31st. Now, Murray helps the Cardinals offense a lot, but they're going to have to put up a lot of points in this game in order to keep pace with his Houston team. I think we should keep on buying Houston until bookmakers begin to show them a bit more respect. And at least to me, this number is not quite doing so yet. So again, I'd want to keep tabs on the market here, see if we can get some better value in Houston at some point, because there's always a possibility it gets to 3.5. I don't think it will, and I don't think it should. So laying the 4.5 to me, -105 at FanDuel Sportsbook, a very okay way to go. So once again, the Houston Texans, for the 10th consecutive games, a value by my number. So we'll take them here, -4.5, taking on Arizona. The second bet is one that burned me last night. I was on the Buffalo Bills, talked about them, -7.5 on Tuesday last week. This week, they are taking on the New York Jets. And even though last night was disgusting, hideous, abysmal, we're going right back to the well. Once again, laying the 6.5 with the Bills. That's -122 at FanDuel Sportsbook right now as a bonus for not laying the full touchdown, getting a full win on 7. So -122 is a lot to lay for sure, but still showing value here personally. The circumstances in the last night's game were pretty wild. Bunch of turnovers for the Bills, which can happen because their offense does do that, but turnovers tend to be more random than a lot of other events. And the Broncos ran really hot on late downs. Like, the Bills would get pressure, but then Russell Wilson would do some Russell Wilson magic, like vintage Russ, and, shuffle pass for a first down. He had some scrambles for a first down. And that's not a lot of stuff you expect from the New York Jets, given the way their offense is operating right now. Even when I add in data from last night's game, my model still makes the Bills 9.5-point favorites in this game. Even when you look at just 2023 data, so looking at a set where the Bills are 5-5 and the offense has had its issues, the Bills still rank 3rd in my model's offensive power rankings after adjusting for their schedule. Their defense is legitimately bad, and that's a concern, not just this week, but also going forward. But the Jets rank dead last by a good margin in that model's offensive power rankings. It's possible the Jets defense can generate some chaos Josh Allen moments here and keep this game pretty close, but that's the only path to a cover I see for them. I don't think this Jets offense, no matter how bad the Bills defense may be, is going to make this game competitive. It would be more so the Bills offense shooting itself in the foot. And that could happen because they just did it last night. But 6.5 to me feels a bit light. It didn't move a lot after last night's game. It was 7 on the look ahead line, but I still think at 6.5, it's a value. So to me, the Bills minus 6.5 against the Jets, a value here, despite how frustrating the team has been the entire year. We bet against the Jets now 3 consecutive weeks here on the show, or I guess not on the show because the Raiders one wasn't up last week, but we're going to do it once again and ride the Bills on Sunday afternoon. Let's talk about a couple of totals where I show value. One of those is in a game that's like kind of interesting between the 49ers and the Buccaneers. That total is 41.5 right now, and I do want the over for this game. Now, getting to 41.5, it does require some out of the Bucs offense, but I don't think they need to do a ton to get an over in this game. This game features my model's second rank overall offense, taking on a defense that ranks 23rd against the pass when you include a prior. If you look at just 2023 data, they've been a bit worse. Brock Purdy back to slinging it once again on Sunday. He had 6 throws, 16 plus yards downfield. He completed all 6 for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. So my model puts the spread at 11.2. It's a 10.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, so no value there in terms of trying to bet that spread. But it does imply that a larger total is justified because a larger spread correlates well with a larger total. There is some wind in Santa Clara for this weekend, projected at 9 miles per hour right now. That does knock the total down in my model, but even when you account for that, I've still got this one above 44 in my model, so I'm happy to take the over here at 41.5. Yes, it is a bit dependent on a Baker Mayfield-led offense putting up some points against a very, very good defense that flexes muscles once again on Sunday, but I'm okay with that personally. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, given that San Francisco will probably put up a lot of points all by themselves against this pretty underwhelming Tampa Bay defense. So Buccaneers, 49ers, over 41.5 minus 110, the first total I like for this week. The second one is one that's actually risen a lot over the past 24 hours. News broke last night that Matthew Stafford will play or expects to play in week 11. So total for the Seahawks Rams went up to 46 overnight. And I want the under here at minus 110 because I think that 46 number seems pretty optimistic. The Rams offense was starting to slip a bit even before Stafford's thumb injury, which occurred in the Dallas game. Now, they scored 20 in that game, but they failed to hit 20 points in 3 out of 5 games leading into the Dallas game where Stafford hurt his thumb. And 2 of those games included Cooper Kupp. Or 3 of those games included Cooper Kupp. So even when Kupp was back, this offense still was not really clicking before the Stafford injury. This is a repeat divisional matchup. These 2 teams faced each other back in week 1, and it was a 43-point total in that game with the Rams winning. Passing efficiency does tend to decline when teams see each other for a second time. This one's buoyed a bit by this game being indoors, so that does help. My model liked the under even when this total was a 44.5. So it does mean we're betting against the market by taking the under at 46 because it has been bet up to that number, but I do feel good in the under now that it is 46. So Rams, Seahawks, under 46, minus 110, the second total I like for this week. So 4 recommendations based on what we're seeing right now. Like that game under 46, like the Bucs 49ers, over 41.5, minus 110. The Bills, minus 6.5, minus 122. And the Texans, minus 4.5 at minus 105. And with that one, if you want to wait to see if you can get a better number later on, I think that is fully justified. But either way, I would want exposure to the Texans at some point. That's going to wrap up the overall recommendations for today. But we do got to go back through last week's recommendations here on the show before we close up shop for today. Let's begin things off by talking about Dr. Ed Feng. You can find him on Twitter at The Power Rank. Check out his work at thepowerrank.com and check out his other podcast, The Football Analytics Show. On the college side of things, Ed, 1-1 for the week. He had Michigan, Penn State over 45.5. That one finished at 39 total points as the Penn State offense once again couldn't get things going. Jim Harbaugh suspension happened. Pretty dramatic overall Saturday there. Did get a win though with Utah. They were plus 9.5 taking on Washington. They didn't win, but they lost that game by 7. So a cover there for Utah to get Ed 1-1 on college football. Also went 1-1 on the NFL side of things. The win was the Bucs -1.5 taking on Tennessee. They won that game by 14, 20-6. And then he had the Bengals -6.5 against Houston. And that was, I think, while T. Higgins kind of up in the air, whether he'd play or not, but regardless, the Texans won that game outright. So 2-2 week overall for Ed, who is back with us once again tomorrow. We had JJ Zacharyson on this week to talk about player props on Friday. Find JJ on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Find his work at LateRound.com and the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. JJ hit 2 more touchdown bets once again this week. Those bets were Jaden Reed to score at +350 and Deebo Samuel +160. Deebo scored on the ground, Jaden Reed through the air. So +350 and +160, depending on scaling, probably got you a profit for the week. The other 3 didn't hit, but depends on the scaling of the bets you gave if you profited there. But good calls by JJ on those. Other ones were Alexander Madison +145. Left early from that game with a concussion. Ty Chandler, I believe, had a touchdown later on in that game. So with the goal line rush, I think that was before Madison got hurt, but can't recall entirely. But the Vikings overall did play pretty well in that game, and hopefully Madison is okay. Other 2 were both from the Tennessee side of things. He liked Will Levis over 220.5 passing yards, -114, and Nick Westbrook-Akina over 18.5 receiving yards. Titans offense didn't work. Levis still almost got there, finished with 199. Westbrook-Akina finished with 9 receiving yards in the game, so couldn't quite get there with the Tennessee passing offense. But again, like I said, depending on how you scale the touchdown bets, potentially still a profitable week for you. So find JJ on Twitter at LateRoundQB. We had Ryan Williams on last night to talk Monday Night Football. Find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. As mentioned, did hit the Cortland Sutton first touchdown score in that game. Dalton Kincaid was 11-1 to score the first one. He scored the second one. So good call by Ryan on both those with the touchdown scores in the game. He liked the over 47.5 -110. Finished at 46. Again, just weird stuff all around. I hated that entire game. So annoying there. Got close with Dalton Kincaid. He had over 5.5 receptions at +114. Kincaid had exactly 5 receptions, so couldn't quite get that one. He had Gabe Davis over 39.5 receiving yards. Gabe had 56. I tried to talk Ryan to an alternate over. Hopefully you did not listen to me because that would not have hit. The 50+ yards did, but looking at 60+, but 39.5 did hit the over there. He had Khalil Shakir over 3.5 receptions. That was +132. Couldn't quite get there. Shakir's role was underwhelming last night. He had just 1 reception. He had Cortland Sutton over 45.5 receiving yards at -113. Sutton had 53 for the game. Also had Jerry Jeudy over 52.5 yards at -113. That one went under because Jeudy didn't do a whole lot for the game. Jaleel McLaughlin over 23.5 rushing plus receiving yards at -114. He finished with 12. Javonte Williams really was not the full feature back, but pretty close to it in that game. Had Gabe Davis +220 for anytime touchdown. That one didn't hit. The fun one was Josh Allen, 4+ touchdowns and a +870. Allen did not get there. And then the Bills -4.5 in the first half at -105. And of course, the Broncos did win in the first half as well. So hopefully the Sutton one made up for it, but good call by Ryan on the Cortland Sutton first touchdown score. And hopefully that made up for the rest of or just a rough night for us overall, because I had the Bills -7.5 as well. As mentioned, find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. He's had a lot of good Mondays for us on the show so far this year. The Bills, for me, was kind of a capper on a frustrating week for me. I had the -7.5 at -105. That did not hit, obviously. Had the Colts -1.5 in the Germany game. They won that game by 4, so they did get a cover there. I had the Commanders and Seahawks under 45.5 -110. That was sitting at 45 late in that game, and the Commanders needed a touchdown to take the lead, and they would not have kicked a field goal, anything like that. And Sam Howell, of course, finds De'Ami Brown, his former college teammate, for a long touchdown to get the over there. Thought I might have that one, slipped away pretty late. So frustrating way for that game to end. I had the Titans and Bucks over 38.5, and Titans offense did nothing. So that bad read by me on that one, but annoyed about the Bills game, annoyed about the Commanders Seahawks under. Thought that one had a chance, but alas, it did not. We'll see if we can bounce back in week number 11. That's all we got here for today on Covering the Spread. Want to give a big thank you once again to Ryan Williams, our guest earlier on today. Find him on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. We are back once again tomorrow talking to Dr. Ed Feng about college football week number 12. You can find that show as it goes live on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. If you like what you hear on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. You can find us on FanDuel TV Plus and the FanDuel YouTube page as well. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sannes. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across the next couple of days. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down another fun slate in college football. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.